It's always a journo's fault. Never a camo. Never, ever, ever. Audio level, David Crisafulli, joined by Jarrod Bleijie, testing 1, 2, 3, live from Parliament, Queensland, testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good morning, everybody. The LNP is today calling on the government to adopt our solutions to help ease the housing crisis. What we have in Queensland at the moment is unprecedented pressure at the market, quite simply because of a lack of supply. And every mixed message that comes out of the government increases the pressure that people are feeling because of the lack of investment in stock. Now, our solutions have been put on the table. We're urging the government to adopt them. One is releasing more lots for housing and embarking on an infrastructure partnership with councils. In the end, state governments are responsible for planning. They do regional plans, and local government is yearning for the opportunity to work with the state government to deliver infrastructure ahead of the game, to open up new opportunities for young people to be able to buy their first home, for people to be able to rent in an area close to where they live and be able to afford to keep a roof over their head. The second is a partnership with the community housing sector. For some reason, this government seems philosophically opposed to partnering with the community housing sector, which in other states have done a great deal of the heavy lifting. And I say other states across the political divide. If you look at the amount of money that has come federally to assist community housing providers, Queensland lags behind other states because of a philosophical aversion from this government to partner with them to unlock the opportunity for them to provide homes at an affordable rate for Queenslanders. And the third is dedicated KPIs to build social housing. The report from the Auditor-General bells the cat on a failure to plan and deliver social housing. And this week, we've had a conga line of people call that out. And I might say, including QCOS, who have raised questions on the government's Signature Housing Investment Fund, where they talk about billions of dollars of investment. To the best of our knowledge, there hasn't been a single Queenslander who's put a roof over their head because of it. And the mixed messages coming out of the government does no one any good whatsoever. We've had the Premier put up a thought bubble, cause chaos and confusion. The Deputy Premier backed her in, and then 24 hours later, the Premier retreats and said, that wasn't my intention and people misunderstood me. Investment requires certainty, and with investment comes more stock that can help Queenslanders be able to keep a roof over their head. No one wins when there is chaos, confusion and mixed messages, and increasingly that's what we are seeing. And before I ask the Deputy to make some comments about this, as well as go into a document that he'll be uncovering today, I just want to make the point to investors here at Queensland and indeed across the country. You might have given up on the government, but please don't give up on Queensland. This is a great place and it is worth investing in. And our job will be to make sure the government feels every bit of pressure to stop the knee-jerk policy reactions and prepare for a change of government where there will be stability for people to be able to buy their first home, to be able to invest in Queensland, to be able to afford to rent. Because in the end, the big loser from a lack of investment are the most vulnerable. Those people who at the moment are in a race for the housing space, and they are losing that race because of a lack of stock for them to go into. There is a feeding frenzy at the bottom end of the market that's been caused by a lack of land release because of lack of infrastructure from the state, because of a lack of housing through the community housing sector, because of a lack of partnerships, and a lack of social housing provided by the state government. And they are our solutions. Infrastructure partnerships to open up housing supply for young people to be able to own and rent, partnerships with the community housing sector to release more opportunities, and dedicated KPIs for social housing to get the most vulnerable off the streets. Over to you, Joe.
Well, thank you, David, and good morning, Jarrod Bleijie, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Well, when is the chaos of this government going to end? When is the chaotic announcements, the thought bubbles going to end? We saw, as the Leader of the Opposition has just explained, a few days ago, the Premier announced live on national TV rental caps were going to be introduced in Queensland. Her Deputy Premier, Stephen Miles, then backed it up and said that they would go by CPI. And then we've seen them backtracking at 100 miles an hour from that announcement because they realised that it was another thought bubble from the Premier. Now, you would ask yourself, have we seen this before in the Queensland Labor government? Absolutely we have. Look at the renters tax they were going to introduce. They put it forward, they campaigned for it, then realised it was a bad idea and withdrew it. Look at the GP patients tax they were going to introduce, another one of Cameron Dick and Anastasia Palaszczuk's taxes. They campaigned for it and then all of a sudden they've kicked it out to the long grass to get it out of the media attention and the eyes of Queenslanders. Look at breach of bail. They campaigned against breach of bail for 8 years, then the Premier copied our policy, but a thought bubble in the Labor Party introduced breach of bail. So this is continually how the government are announcing their policies, in a very chaotic and mad way, how they are going about governing Queenslanders. And it's no wonder that investors and Queenslanders are starting to sit back now and say, my goodness gracious, who is running the show in Queensland? We have seen this all before. The chaos has to end at some point. What was more concerning and alarming is when the Premier realised that the rental caps that she had announced on national TV and then spent 3 days getting her colleagues to back her in and talking about it, then realised it was such a bad idea and she started withdrawing and backing away from her own announcement. She couldn't be just honest with Queenslanders, be upfront with Queenslanders and say, I got it wrong again, so this is what we're going to do after listening to Queenslanders. No, she blamed people for not understanding what she meant. She blamed people for misinterpreting what she meant. There was no way to misinterpret what the Premier meant when she said, we are going to have full rental caps in Queensland. We're going to look at this next week. There was no other way to interpret that as to the Premier was going to introduce full rental caps across Queensland. But now she blames everybody else because she realised it was a thought bubble, it was chaos, that's how she's running the government. She is gaslighting Queenslanders. Anastasia Palaszczuk is gaslighting Queenslanders, making out that it's Queenslanders that should have interpreted and contextualised what she meant. Sorry, Premier, you made the announcement on national TV. Everyone knew what you meant. And then we saw the investors, the property market, the opposition, renters, landlords, all opposing what she had announced on national TV. And again, no, she doesn't think she takes the blame for it. It's everyone else's fault. She is absolutely gaslighting Queenslanders. But if the Premier wants to talk about caps, yesterday I went to the Legacy Forum where the Premier talked, and she was on the stage and she said that she wants to share the stage with the Olympics. Well, everyone knows that's rubbish. The Premier doesn't want to share the stage on the Olympic glory with anybody. But what she didn't do in her speech yesterday, the Premier did not mention the Gabba. Not once. The big project that she's announced, $2.7 billion project, and she could not utter the words Gabba redevelopment. The Premier could not utter the words $2.7 billion. She could not utter the words the blowout from $1 billion Gabba redevelopment to $2.7 billion. If she's so proud of this budget blowout, if she's so proud of the $2.7 billion announcement she made, why could she not utter the words with a captive audience of 500 people yesterday who are all interested in legacy for the Olympics? She's embarrassed of the blowout, and she should be. Who else is embarrassed by the budget blowout on the Gabba? Her mate, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. Because the Premier talks about caps. Well, so too did Anthony Albanese, but not rental caps, funding caps. In the agreement they signed in February of this year for the Olympic delivery for 2032 Games, they talked about capping funding. More so, if you go to the document signed by Anthony Albanese, they talked about the Commonwealth providing the $2.5 billion for the Brisbane Live and roughly $1 billion for other infrastructure, excluding the Gabba, other infrastructure across Queensland in terms of sporting infrastructure. But the key word in this is the Commonwealth Government, the Anthony Albanese government, will provide capped funding. What does that mean? It means The Premier's mate, Anthony Albanese, does not even trust her to deliver projects on time and on budget in Queensland. So every blowout on every stadium and sporting infrastructure built under this agreement will be funded by the Queensland taxpayer, not the Commonwealth. The federal government have been smart enough to look at the record of the state Labor government in terms of blowouts, the Coomera to Connector $600 million, the Light Rail Gold Coast $500 million, the Cross River Rail from $5.4 billion to $8 billion. The federal government have been smart enough to say we'll sign an agreement for 50-50 funding on infrastructure, but we're not going to cover the blowouts because they know this $2.7 billion Gabbett blowout is nothing compared to what we will see in terms of other blowouts in the state of Queensland. So I would say to the Premier, be upfront with people of Queensland. Why has the Premier not given this document out to anyone? Why have they not put this on their Facebook sites and sung from the rafters about how great this document is? Because the Labor federal government do not trust the Labor state government to be able to deliver the Olympic infrastructure on time and on budget. And why would they? Because the state Labor government have a history and a bad record when it comes to delivering projects on time and on budget. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Cheers.